Eskom's power stations, for example, still receive about 90% of their coal from only white-owned companies, some of which have been built giant business empires on the back of the guaranteed cash flow these contracts have provided.
Giant white-owned businesses have been milking the state-owned power utility for decades.
Eskom has never had a culture of doing competitive bid. Those companies that happen to be white-owned companies acquired, they are doing business with Eskom. Over the last 5 years, it was 74 billion, and there were no competitive bids.
An inconvenient truth that is studiously ignored every single time it is raised, which in any case is not often enough.
Our idea is to move away. We've got an instruction from the minister to stop doing cost-plus mines and to introduce black economic empowerment and competitive bids. This is things that we are now beginning to change in the last 2 to 3 years.
I'm proud that you have made a difference at Eskom and saved the country.
The story of a captured, arm-twisted and bleeding Eskom. Dismissed as an insignificant distraction, while the politically juicy narrative of state capture hogs the limelight.
The private sector was profiteering and profiteering beyond what is acceptable.
We have white monopoly capital trying to defend itself because it thinks it's under threat.
This is what they are scared of, that we might today radically transform this economy.
ANN7 now digs deeper to unearth for you the dark secrets hidden in South Africa's coal piles. The groundwork for this coal capture began as early as the 1940s. In pre-apartheid era, Eskom's coal suppliers were established mining companies selling coal through cost-plus and fixed-price contracts.
The government entered under apartheid into very long-term agreements with these monopolies that were located very close to the Eskom power stations. The problem with long-term agreements around coal supply is that the prices of coal may vary, but you continue to pay the same price that you agreed to in the initial agreement with regard to the coal supply to the power station, which means that if the price of coal falls, Eskom still buys coal at an inflated price because the original price was higher than the price when the price of the commodity fell. That led to a situation where they developed a coal monopoly in South Africa. Okay, so 4 or 5 big companies dominated the coal market under apartheid and continue to dominate the coal market even after apartheid in South Africa. And the coal supplies to Eskom is no exception to that domination by these big monopolies. So Anglo Coal, Exxaro, Glencore, BHP Billiton, and so on were the companies that did the supplies.
A handful of players and absence of competitive bidding made for a perfectly conducive environment for unfair trade practices to breed. The beneficiaries of this decades-old exclusive coal club ironically made it to the most favored list solely through patronage.
Those original contracts did not have competitive bids. Eskom has never had a culture of doing competitive bids. It is something that we have just introduced.
So effectively, the cost-plus mines were nothing but patronage, and patronage which one can only say that was used in such a manner that today we know, of course, has effectively caused economic harm to this country.
It is important to lift the debate in regard to procurement around the coal issue, so that it can be clear to everyone what's the remit and scope of all the contractors that have received contracts from Eskom to provide coal.
As the curtains part, the spotlight falls on the Big Four, the coal conglomerate that accounts for 80% of Eskom's total supplies. The giants who secured 40 to 50-year-long contracts, most of which are still intact. This means guaranteed profits for the suppliers, supplies at the mining company's wish, and almost no room to maneuver for the hapless Eskom. Fundamentally flawed and against the best business practices, they became a means to ensure the state billions were funneled to private coffers.
Eskom, it's a sort of 20, 30, 40-year contracted mines that has been given to people 20, 30, 40 years ago. And those mines, the land, the machinery, the labor, everything is paid for by Eskom, and these people just pay a management fee to Eskom. So we have to relook everything.
Eskom was not just being sapped financially, it was also taking all the flack for poor performance. And all this while the Big Four suppliers continued to make merry and millions. Till recently, when Eskom put its foot down and in the process ruffled many feathers.
History obliges us to change tact, to transform the economy. And that's what we're doing. Now, please see the Tageta things and all the other people are still going to a point from which probably the traditional suppliers will take umbrage and use the press and probably will use the courts to maintain their privilege.
For the longest time, and due to captive mines and decade-long contracts, Eskom had no option but to succumb to the terms and conditions laid down by the Big Four. It won't be an exaggeration to say that the oligopolistic control of coal supply was choking Eskom. The company was in the red, staring at a dark future riddled with load shedding. If the power utility had to survive, somebody needed to say enough is enough.
Eskom decided it would no longer let anyone take undue advantage, and it started by taking the biggest bull by the horns. Exxaro, the single largest supplier of coal to Eskom, accounting for over 30% of Eskom's total needs, making billions in the process. And Arnott Mine is a sample of how Exxaro's coffers were being filled by Eskom's money.
Well, Exxaro has been a cost-plus mine. It has received a lot of prepayments from Eskom to carry out its mining operations, yet they wanted to charge us exorbitantly per gigajoule, much higher than any other supplier. We turned this down.
Exxaro had a long-term contract to supply 4 million tons of coal to Arnott Power Station, but the company had consistently failed to meet its contractual requirements since 2011. Instead of being on the back foot, Exxaro was charging 250% more for its coal than the market price, and in a blatant show of audacity, also wanted to force Eskom to renegotiate and escalate prices further.
Let's take a look now at how Exxaro was arm-twisting Eskom. Exxaro's Arnott contract was to end in 2023. Insisted on renegotiation of contract as early as in 2015. Taking a further look, Eskom says Exxaro was charging 1,132 rand per ton for coal in 2015, and that same coal is available in the market for under 500 rand per tonne. Exxaro unable to deliver on its full 4 million tonne commitment since 2011, and Eskom was getting only about 1 million tonne in 2015. Exxaro unable to deliver on its full 4 million tonne commitment since 2011, maintaining Arnold Power Station supply became a struggle. Furthermore, Eskom Exxaro contract price was forecast to rise over 1,300 rand per tonne if extended, and the same coal is available in the market for under 500 rand per tonne. Exxaro wanted Eskom to pay for development of Mooifontein reserves to reduce those costs, and the same coal was still available in the market for under 500 rand per tonne. That's what we know so far.
How did they end up with a situation whereby Exxaro, for example, taking into account its history, that not only did it have where it was on this cost plus mine, it was being paid way over about what the actual cost would have been. And as somebody who knows about coal, somebody who knows about mining, I can competently tell you that the price of 1,132 rand could never have been a cost that is reflective of the geology of that area. It is just completely was greedy, downright profiteering, but how has it been allowed?
The mining giant's brazenness does not end there. Not only did Exxaro consistently blame Eskom for high prices and depleting supply, they had also refused to absorb the hundreds of people that were left unemployed when the mine shut down. Exxaro hasn't responded to ANN7 queries on the fate of the miners.
Now, what happened at Arno is not an aberration. Eskom has not only been paying through its nose to buy coal at inflated prices, it's also been paying billions for coal it cannot and does not use.
Long-term contracts are not the only tool used by mining companies to squeeze Eskom. There is another draconian instrument. It is called take or pay, a provision that has cost Eskom billions.
Well, let's take a look now at how Exxaro was once again playing hardball with Eskom. Eskom pays 6.7 billion rand for nothing. Eskom signed a long-term agreement with Exxaro that was in 2008. The contract for coal from Grootegeluk mine from Medupi Power Station. Taking a further look, Eskom hasn't been able to take any coal since May 2012. And coal could not be taken due to delay in construction and the lack of storage capacity at Medupi. Taking a further look here, Eskom has paid 6.7 billion rand to Exxaro till date under take or pay clause, and also Eskom unable to claw back the money even though it is not taking any coal there. Further look, Exxaro reluctant to assist Eskom in exploring options to use Medupi coal stockpile, and Exxaro hesitant in transporting the coal to Richards Bay coal terminal. Further, Exxaro agrees to divert coal to Matimba Power Station, but only till 2017. And Eskom says Exxaro acting tough during negotiations to mitigate that impact. That is Eskom paying 6.7 billion rand for nothing. That's what we do know for now.
At Medupi, it was a take or pay situation. Even when they realized that the build program was being delayed, they still charged us exorbitantly for coal, which was not being burnt because the turbines were not working, the boilers were not working. So they have been very opportunistic in their relationship with Eskom.
Given Exxaro's brazenness, there is little hope that Eskom will be able to get its billions back. But despite the exorbitant bill and obvious exploitation of the state-owned enterprise, no one seems outraged. No summons from the Standing Committee on the Public Accounts, no cries of a probe by the Public Protector, no protest marches, no anger, shock, indignation, or headlines in the media.
We now know, and we are horrified, that 6.7 billion rand has been given to Exxaro without even delivering one wheelbarrow based on penalties. The circumstances of how that contract was negotiated, they have to be looked into, and the guilty parties have to be held accountable. Also has to be asked about the board of Exxaro. It should have dawned on them that clearly this is not a situation that is acceptable, that in the current climate, and taking into account their own history and their own obligations in terms of the economy of this country, how could they allow a situation where they earned 6.7 billion rand unduly without delivering? And I am astonished that nobody from Parliament, nobody within government, nobody within the African National Congress has even once asked a simple question: how did we get to a situation whereby 6.7 billion rand from Eskom has been completely been given as a gift? This has been a Christmas and a birthday all in one for Exxaro. This is absolutely, it's a tragedy of immense proportions, and it is a travesty that the people that seek to reverse this, in the form of the chairperson of the board of Eskom, Dr. Benny Ngubane, and the CEO of Eskom, Mr. Brian Molefe, they are now being punished for asking these very key fundamental questions. Tragically, they are even being punished by the governing party. And that is a situation that should never be allowed.
So playing hardball seems to be Exxaro's natural way of dealing with Eskom. The bullish behavior is also on display at its Matla mine in an uncanny reminder of the strong-arm tactics used in the Arno mine case.
Under delivery, no accountability, and strong-arm tactics, a mainstay in Exxaro's negotiations, the tendency to steamroll comes to the fore again at Matla Mine. Exxaro's Matla Mine under-delivered coal at 8.5 million tons last year against a contractual volume of 10.1 million tons. But again, all logic, Exxaro's brazenness took no beating. It decided to put pressure on Eskom, and just like it did with Moerfontein, threw its toys and sought a whopping 2.8 billion rand from Eskom for expansion. Ngubane's team under Molefe balked at Exxaro's bill of 2.8 billion rand for the proposed mine expansion. Intriguingly, when pulled into a negotiation, Exxaro agreed to do the same job for just 1.8 billion.
When you have an astute, shrewd manager such as Mr. Molefe coming on board, it is for that reason that we have seen this level of pushback, because it's not only in terms of coal supply contracts, it's in terms of really the whole value chain of Eskom as a power system or as a utility, that then harder questions were being asked to ensure that Eskom can be the lowest cost producer of electricity, to therefore be able to afford South Africa the competitive advantage, because electricity is one of the key ingredients that you need to be able to achieve competitiveness economically. So these are some of the questions that it shows you that the price could happily move from 2.8 billion rand to 1.8 billion rand. And yet again, there you can clearly see that that was nothing but profit. Even the 1.7 billion, well, Eskom, I believe, that would have had no other choice except to pay that, because they needed the coal, and they need coal at mine mouth supply distance in order for them to be able to continue to be low cost. And also, we don't have the infrastructure for Eskom power stations to receive coal that is from far off destinations.
Eskom's board's aggressive negotiation helped it save 1 billion rand, but it is difficult to understand how Exxaro could agree to do the same job for 35% less money if it was not guilty of inflating the original quote of 2.8 billion rand in the first place. Eskom over the years had tamely surrendered to such bullying because of monopoly control on coal supplies to different power stations. But the new board was determined to break the stranglehold and to fight for every cent. What is surprising to see is the Treasury and the media's silence over the blackmail that Eskom is subjected to by the likes of Exxaro.
The government then got Eskom only to be building the power stations and then gave this select group of coal mining companies that were established to specifically then supply coal. But Eskom then had to foot the bill, so to speak, on every single aspect in terms of establishing the mine as well as on the cost of mining of the coal and supplied into the power station. Then these private sector companies, and very few of them, then they earned a fee for the coal that they mined to supply into Eskom. But also very puzzling is that they were further allowed to export the coal. So again, in terms of patronage, we saw the apartheid era government building a Richards Bay coal terminal in 1972, which got commissioned in 1976, which until recently was the largest coal export terminal in the world, which, by the way, is still controlled by this oligopolistic cartel of coal miners who were established by the state using taxpayers' funds, so to speak, for them to be able to be the big coal mining companies that they have come today.
Coercion and arm twisting seem to be usual tactics deployed by Exxaro to have their way. But when it comes to meeting Eskom's demands, they turn a blind eye and a deaf ear.
The company that makes billions of rands off the state funds is least interested in giving it back to the country and the society, while Exxaro has left no stones unturned to make to maximum profits from its coal deals. It conveniently shrugs off its responsibility towards transformation. Despite Eskom's repeated resistance, the mining company had gone ahead with its plans to cut its black ownership. The move flies in the face of Eskom's current local procurement policy that requires all mines that now sign up to supply coal to have a black ownership target of more than 50%. But Exxaro doesn't care two hoots. So how does Exxaro get away with this arrogance? It's all thanks to their long-term contracts and the long-lasting prevalence of the once empowered, always empowered principle.
Exxaro wanted to reduce their level of BEE to 33% instead of 50+1. We told them that we will not buy coal from them if they do that.
It is this sense of entitlement that Eskom is struggling to tackle. And it does not help that the power that controls the purse, the treasury, seems to be on the other side.
The sad irony of Eskom's struggles is that it has been left isolated in its battle with the monopolistic giants, a travesty that came to the fore when it tried to tackle the fallout of Exxaro's Arnold contract being terminated. Eskom had to rely on short-term contracts for coal procurement after Exxaro did not bring down prices and was cut off. An alternative solution was substantial coal easily available at Optimum Colliery. But inexplicably, Treasury rejected Eskom's request to extend Tegeta's contract. Instead, Eskom was instructed to go back to Exxaro's doors.
Well, this is what shocks us, because we'd expect Treasury, National Treasury, to be on the side of Eskom, it being a state-owned company. But they are favoring a private sector company at our expense. This is shocking, in fact. Treasury has decided to take away the power from Eskom to procure coal. Eskom is an electricity company. People sit in Treasury. They have no idea how electricity is generated. They are now insisting that they are going to see Exxaro. They will have a meeting with Exxaro. Exxaro said on its documents, they cannot supply the quality of coal that we need.
Yes, sir.
They said so. But Treasury still insists that we must buy from them. So what is this? To me, radical transformation must start with the Treasury.
Given Exxaro's track record, by redirecting Eskom to the same company that precipitated the crisis, Treasury appears to be giving a tacit nod to continuous blackmail.
Well, we know that, Treasury and this minister have been speaking of privatization in more than just a public-private company situation or contract situation. There's a serious intent on breaking up Eskom and forming separate companies that will benefit the investors, and by investors I mean the people with money, the banks and the big companies.
The unlawful interference by National Treasury in the procurement decisions of Eskom, which has got a duly established board and organized under company law, it is downright dangerous. It is incumbent upon the president of this country to really put a stop to this madness we are seeing out of National Treasury. National Treasury that, by the way, has demonstrated that, if anything, knows absolutely nothing. They are clueless about coal. Hence, some of the decisions and some of the demands and some of the instructions they have been giving have only sought to imperil this important state-owned entity called Eskom. How can they therefore be expected to make such important decisions on key things such as procurement? Because without feedstock, the lights are off, and that feedstock is coal into a power station. How can you have people who know nothing about coal negotiating and determining which mine the utility is supposed to be procuring coal from? That is clear. It's unlawful. It's unlawful interference, but economically dangerous, and it must be stopped.
What we have unearthed so far is not even the tip of the Kohlberg. It's just about one company and 3 instances of Eskom's exploitation.
Unsettled by the prospective coal market shake-up, the white-owned coal giants are fighting tooth and nail to secure their stake.
Issue is that the majority of people in this country are black, that the economy is in the hands of a small group of people, and this is what they are scared of, that we might today radically transform this economy.
Some in the Eskom management had started showing spine, standing up to the monopoly giants and their blackmail, but their tenures came to an abrupt end. Now, it seems the monopolistic forces are finding it hard to digest that someone has finally dared disrupt their centuries-old, uninterrupted, secure channels funneling state billions. One can only hope that Eskom does not go back to being that cash cow it has been for those milking it over the years.